Welcome to Unscripted with Russo. For our podcast, we decided to explore the people behind the narratives. I'll introduce decision makers and influencers and find out the intimate story behind their rise to success. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Unscripted with Russo. I'm Ashley Russo, and I'm excited to be joined today by an amazing woman. You will want to know all about her story. Her name is Maraleen Shields. She's the shareholder at Fitzpatrick Lentz Bubba, an amazing law firm, a client of ASR Media. And she's been all over social media herself in recent years with everything she's taking part of in the Lehigh Valley. So Maraleen, nice to meet you. Nice to see you. Thanks for joining the podcast.
I'm thrilled to be here. It's so nice to finally meet you virtually. Next time I see you in person, I'm going to make it happen. I promise.
Yeah, Maraleen and I were comparing notes that we've been at some of the same events, but we're like ships passing, and you know how you can't get across the room fast enough. And of course, now we're wearing masks. So you're sort of like, is that so-and-so? So we'll have to make a point of getting together soon in person. I wanted to start off just by asking you to tell us a little bit about yourself. You know, where did you grow up, and tell me a little bit about your family and your childhood.
I grew up in the suburbs of Pittsburgh, so I'm a Pittsburgh girl, North Braddock. Some people know it now because that's where our current lieutenant governor is living. John Fetterman lives in Braddock. It's a stone's throw from where I grew up, an old
So I put it on the map.
Yes, puts it on the map. Yes, it's an old steel town. It's very reminiscent of Bethlehem in that regard. So I grew up in this really wonderful area that was vibrant and diverse. I tell people that I went to a school district that was actually created by court order. It was court mandated desegregation that brought these 5 very different school districts together to make this mega school district called Woodland Hills. And that's where I went to school. It's where I graduated from back in 1996.
Wow. So that's really interesting, actually. I mean, do you think about, I'm not sure you thought about it as a kid, but what kind of influence that had on you and the exposure that you got to a variety of people from a big school district that was diverse?
Absolutely. And I probably spent too much time thinking about it. What life would have been like if that merger had not occurred. I would have certainly gone to General Braddock High School, which was predominantly Black school district. I know that I had opportunities to do things, to experience things that I absolutely would not have had, but for this court-ordered merger of these school districts. And I also grew up knowing that not everyone was happy about it. There were parents from General Braddock that hated it. There were parents from Turtle Creek. And to this day, you can find articles where people are saying it was a horrible thing. It never should have happened. I have great perspective on it and understanding that there was a drain out of that school district because some people just weren't happy. And that meant private schools were getting those students. There's a Central Catholic in Pittsburgh as well, Pittsburgh Central Catholic. A lot
and
of
it's
people
so funny, I have to tell
there.
you, and my kids go to Allentown Central Catholic for the opposite reason, which is that our school district is not particularly diverse. And I wanted them to go to an environment in an inner city with a diverse population with the opportunity to participate, give back, and meet people from diverse backgrounds, which I couldn't get in the public school here.
Right.
So it's sort of, it's interesting depending on the region, what the reason, but I like that you were aware of that. Were you aware of that when you were there? Was it something overt enough that as a teenager and young adult, you knew what was going on?
It happened in 1981. So we were, and I shouldn't say every student was cognizant, but I absolutely was cognizant of that change and what it would mean. I had family who went to General Braddock who could talk to me about, oh, this is where I went to school. And the school was still there. It wasn't being used, but the school was still physically present. So yes, I was very aware of that history, and it informs how I talk about these things now. When we talk about desegregation, we talk about civil rights movement. For most people, they think of that as something that happened a long time ago. And I've always been cognizant that no, some of this stuff is still happening. If it's happening within my lifetime, my mother's lifetime, she was born in 1953. That's recent history. That's not ancient history. It's still very present. The reverberations are still being felt.
And also it's living history. I mean, you mentioned that my mom's 1952, I graduated 94. So we're in a pretty similar timeline. And, we have to take advantage of the concept that people who can give us living histories can contribute to our education, our children's education, and so forth. I know my daughter's taking a modern history course, and one of the things is pop culture. And she had to interview someone about the 1960s, and she chose my dad. And it was a verbal interview that she then wrote up. And I thought, this is one of the more interesting projects that she'll remember, not only for the content he gave her, but from his vantage point, as well as a connection, right, to a living historical, dialogue. So it's just kind of cool.
There's a documentary, Summer of Soul. Have you seen this documentary?
I have not, but I did see the advertisements for it.
By Questlove, and it was about this Summer
I'm writing
of
it down.
Soul. Yes, write this down. Summer of Soul. I'm a big, like, you must watch this. But it was about this festival that took place in Harlem over a series of weeks. And it happened around the same time as Woodstock. And for whatever reason, it kind of been lost to history. But some of the biggest acts of the time, so you'd get Gladys Knight and the Pips, you had David Ruffin, but you also had more kind of hippie progressive groups. Nina Simone was there. It was just like a mishmash of all of these really interesting and important acts of the day. Fifth Dimension was there. But for whatever reason, it didn't have the biography of Woodstock. There was no documentary that came out about it. And for a lot of us, I didn't know it existed. I just sent it to my mother and to my aunt. I said, you have to watch this. And they're like, what is this? It's like, you didn't know about this, but in Harlem in the 60s, there was this really great thing and it was wonderful. And there were no incidents. And it was just kind of lost to history until Questlove brought it back. But I'm absolutely this believer that we're living in history. We're not just observing it, but we're creating it in every moment. And that you have to be kind of thinking about not just ancient history, but recent history and how you're going to shape it and what you're going to do to make it different. Because we're creating the stories that our kids are going to tell, our grandkids are going to tell. If I have grandkids, it's up to
Agreed.
them. It's up to them.
I totally agree. And I think what I'm always curious about is, how do you frame yourself when you look at your own history? You mentioned family and family members. Tell me a little bit more about your family and the people in it, and kind of the role that they played in your life, and especially as a younger child, and how they influenced you in a way that you realized in the moment, and that now you're looking back at your own history and seeing how that's kind of influenced your life.
Very big family, first and foremost. My mother is one of 12 children. So
Whoa, 12.
And no twins, just
oh my gosh, that's amazing.
12 pregnancies, like never, ever, ever. I was a two and doneer. And I'm sure in part because I saw what it's like to be one of 12, but very woman dominant in the sense that my maternal grandfather died when my mother was just like 9 years old, but my grandmother kind of just continued on, and there are many stories of that ilk in my family. My father passed away when I was in 4th grade. My mom we just moved on. So I came from just a group of really strong women who were getting the work done and raising the family, and it was just how it was done. You did everything. So after my father passed away, my mother put herself through college. Here was a straight A student in high school who did not go immediately to college, because that wasn't the history of our family. That's not how things worked. You graduated from high school and you went to work. That was what you were supposed to do. And the occasion of, it's a classic making lemonade out of lemons. My father passed away, and my mother, it kind of forced her to think about, where's she going? What is she wanting to do? She put herself through college. She got her social work degree. She became a master's level social worker and just changed the trajectory. And I got to watch that. And to the extent that I decided that I was going to not just go to work after high school, it's because I saw her and I thought, oh, wouldn't it be nice to just go to college first and kind of decide what I want to do, not just immediately move into the workforce? She let me know that that was a viable way to go.
And what an incredible opportunity for you, and what an amazing woman she must be to do that. Because you say like, oh, she went back to school, but meanwhile, she's lost her husband, right? She's raising, do you have siblings?
I have a sister, an older sister.
Yeah. She's raising two daughters and then goes back to school. And I've always have such admiration for moms that go back to school, or working moms that go back to school, because I just think, how do they do it? How do they fit it in, and they make it a priority? And then the example that it showed you and your sister is just, you can hear it in your voice, it really resonated with you and did change the trajectory of your life and your family. When you were watching that happen, what were you doing in your free time? I mean, what activities were you participating in school that you thought maybe were either fun or would have a benefit to your future? And did you have a part-time job? Like, what were you sort of doing to infuse your life? You seem like an extremely purposeful person. So I'm assuming you weren't like accidentally finding yourself at a thing. You were purposefully choosing activities. I'd love to know what they were.
I'm not accidental at all. I was the overachiever kid. I did everything that I could. So I was lucky enough to be chosen to be in the gifted and talented program when I was in, I think, fourth grade. And it gave me opportunities to do extra stuff, like play games like equations and linguistics. And eventually that led to mock trial and competitions. And I was in chorus and I played a violin. I also played a trombone because I wanted to go on the great band trips. I was also an athlete. I am someone that can't just have one thing that I'm doing at a given time. I like to have a variety. I like to have a lot of things going on. And I just have always had multiple things going on to this day. I'm sure it bothers everyone around.
I don't, Maraleen, I don't know anything about what you're describing.
I don't have, although I've post-election, I've certainly developed a little bit more of a chill factor, or at least what chill is for me, but I don't have that sort of, I don't want to do anything sense about me. I think my life is limited. It's short. I have no idea how long it will be. I mean, my father was, a pretty young guy. I don't even know that he was 30 when he passed away. So I have this sense that I have no idea how much time I have here on this earth. So let me just pack it all in. I'm going to try as much food. I'm going to learn as much stuff. I'm going to fill my brain with things that I think are interesting and fun, because who knows when this is over.
I would say this: if you can turn a negative into a positive, that is certainly an amazing way to honor your father's legacy, and certainly, make your mom proud of what she set as an example. So I love that. We're going to take a quick break, but we're going to come back with Maraleen Shields. We're going to talk a little bit more about her education, where she went off to college, and how she found herself pursuing a law degree. So you're listening to Unscripted. We'll be right back. As a mother of two, I know it can be tough to find activities that everyone will enjoy. Luckily, the Lehigh Valley has so many ways to treat your family without breaking the bank. You can experience cool discoveries at the Da Vinci Science Center, or all aboard the WK&S Railroad train for an afternoon adventure. There's fun around every corner of the Lehigh Valley, and you can uncover it all on Discover Lehigh Valley's website. Visit discoverlehighvalley.com for more information. Welcome back to Unscripted with Russo. I'm Ashley Russo, and I have been joined by Maraleen Shields. She is a lawyer with Fitzpatrick Lentz Bubba. She is telling us about her extraordinary life, her upbringing. Her mom is one of 12. She lost her dad young. Mom went back to college. Just being surrounded by strong women and the influence that had on you. I mean, Maraleen, I just think that it's amazing how in touch you are with the influences that had in your life. You then decide to go to college. I mean, you saw your mom do it and go back to school as an adult. I mean, a young adult, but an adult raising kids. At what point did you know and say, that's a goal of mine, I'm going to college? And how did you set your sights on that? You were in a gifted and talented program, I should mention. You were involved in a lot of stuff. So you were definitely working on how to make a good application happen.
I was, and I had a lot of mentors, and I've joked with people that I've collected male father figures along the way. So I can, I can think of Mr. Medeiros, Mr. Stanzak, men who were just talking to me about going to college as if it was just a thing that was going to happen. And the more I had people in my life just talking about it as, well, this is the next logical step, I believed it was just the next logical step. And then the one problem was, how do we pay for it? Like, where do we go? How much is it going to cost? How do we pay for it? Because we're not an independently wealthy family. And I remember I had this opportunity to go to Penn State and study there for a summer while I was in high school. And, close your ears if you're a Penn State person, but I absolutely hated it. I was there in the middle of the summer and I thought there were too many people. I liked that it was rural, but I had no desire to be in a very large university atmosphere, similar to the conversation we were having about your daughter. It just
wasn't for you.
College football, I could care less about.
Yeah. But isn't it great to have that experience? I mean, I think, I was able to do things like that as well. Like I went to a program in DC when I was a junior and, experienced colleges and have a sense for what I wanted. And that's, I have to say, just on a personal note, one of the challenges of having teenagers during COVID has been how limited their exposure has been to those experiences. So what do we always tell people, right? When you're mentoring, just as important to know what you don't want as to know what you
exactly.
do want. So at least you check
just
that
need
off
to
the
go.
box, right? But you end up at Kenyon College in Ohio. And how did you make that happen?
Driving back from Penn State, my mom brought my mail. And the amount of mail that I got from colleges was just like extraordinary. I still remember like which campaigns were good campaigns. Juniata had a very good campaign, but I just started removing all the schools that were really large. That's how I just started. And I said, well, let me just look at small schools. Now, I went to a large high school. I graduated with over 500 students. And I said, maybe try something smaller than that. Kenyon came up, Kalamazoo came up, Oberlin came up. And I remember I couldn't apply to every place I wanted to apply to because it cost money then to apply to schools. It was like 50 or 75 bucks a pop to apply. So I ended up choosing two. I chose Kenyon and I chose Oberlin. And I had not visited either. And I visited Kenyon. I made my mom go. It was 3 hours from our home. I wanted someplace where if I hated it, I could get home without having to get on a plane, which I couldn't afford. So that was part of the reason why Kenyon ended up in the sphere of, final places. We drove there. It's 3 hours. Most of it's a 1-lane road. It's rural Ohio. There were these beautiful Gothic buildings. And I said to my mom, I said, yeah, this is it. Like, this is the thing that I want, this sort of old history. You walk into the cafeteria and it wasn't new furniture. It was old benches that were uncomfortable, wood, and just buildings from the day that school was founded. And I love that idea of, it's so old and it's been here a long time. It doesn't feel like a concrete jungle. I just knew, and I never visited Oberlin. I mean, it was kind of one of those love at first sight. And if you look around me, there's, I'm blurred out in the background. There is Kenyon stuff everywhere. It's just, one of my first true loves was that school. It was, in hindsight, it was probably a stretch of a school. And the idea that I thought I was getting in, let alone getting enough money, was like, someone should have talked to me about this. There should have been a safe school.
It might have been a good example though of ignorance is bliss, right? Like, I mean, sometimes you don't know, so you dream it and you say, we're going to make this happen, and you will it into fruition, I think. And I feel like there's a little bit of that lost these days because there's so much digital at our fingertips, and it's like, well, let me look this up and figure that out. Even my husband and I were talking about that. I mean, he actually saved his paper applications to college and his essays, and he's got this whole bin, and we were going through things and he was showing kids papers, and we were getting eye rolls, but you know how that goes. So it was fascinating to say, like, there's no sense of like, you really had to commit to the concept because it cost money. It was time. You were on a typewriter or a printer that went. Oh, I love
And
though
you
that
had
you
to write,
knew. I love
and
that
you
you
had
knew.
to write
Yeah.
different essays for
For
each
every
school.
school, there was no Common App, everyone.
There's no Common App.
Mm.
I had to think about what I remember. I wrote an essay and I likened myself to Kermit the Frog. I'm so embarrassed to say it right now. And I said it wasn't easy being green. And I was just like, oh my goodness, I was so corny. But they took me anyway. They're like, we can work with this.
I love it. Well, someone read it and saw some kind of potential, and I'm glad it was the right fit for you, because it sounds like you totally maximized your experience. I understand that you ran track and field. To be an athlete in college is like next level time commitment. I have a couple friends whose kids do it, and I have such admiration for being able to do that kind of time management. Did you do it because you loved it, because it was good exercise, because it was a thing to participate in, or what was your reason behind it? You were good at it, I assume.
I didn't know to stop. I had been doing
You've
it
just
since
been doing
junior.
it.
I had been
Now
doing
you're
it
reminding
since
me of
junior
Forrest
high.
Gump. You just kept running. You
Going.
ran, so you just kept running.
No, I did it in high school. I did it in junior high. I did like traveling. It was a great way to travel to other schools. I do enjoy the camaraderie of running. I was a short distance runner, so I did jumps. I did nothing more than 400 meters at that time. I loved it. And I filled my, much as I do now, I filled my Kenyan experience with as much as I could. There are two things I didn't do. And if I had it to do again, I would have gone abroad. I didn't go abroad. And that was my own fear at the time, and just not knowing how to navigate that. And I didn't take a language, and I should have done that in college. I should have learned to speak a second language sooner.
Now, I've heard that you are currently learning Spanish because of your kids. Is that accurate?
My husband and I decided that our children needed to be bilingual. And I am the type of person that says, if I'm going to force my children to do something, I have to do it too. My husband doesn't have that problem. He's fine with it. But I thought that if it was important enough to take, at the time it was our 3-year-old daughter, and move her from her daycare where everything was in English, and move her to a place where nothing would be in English all day long, the least I could do is make the effort to be bilingual like her. And we both are. I mean, we have made that a reality. We succeeded with her. Didn't have as much time with our son to get him there, but he still has time, and he has a great foundation when he can finally take Spanish in his school. But she speaks Spanish, I speak Spanish. That's just what it is.
Maraleen, it's such a tremendous commitment that you demonstrate towards anything you sink your teeth into. And I suspect that a lot of that is just who you are, but also the way you were shaped and what you're describing about the strong women in your life. When you think about the characteristics you possess that get you to take on those types of commitments, what's your advice to people out there listening? People often have trouble kind of getting out of neutral, let alone committing to something. I'm a huge fan of the book Atomic Habits, and it's not sure if that's one you've read, but you don't need to read it.
No.
I'm sure you already demonstrated in your life, but you might find it highly affirming. So
I like affirmation.
Yeah, well then read Atomic Habits. It's a great one. But the analogy they open with is nobody gets out of bed in the morning and goes and runs a marathon. Like if you want to run a marathon, you get out of bed in the morning and you put your sneakers at the foot of the bed. And that's like step one. So I'm curious, what is your methodology, your advice, your thought to how to make a commitment and stick with it, to actually feel the affirmation and the sense of accomplishment that comes along with that?
I don't know if you know this, but I've worked out every day for the last 1,494 days, I think, at this point.
I heard that, and I honestly couldn't believe it. I'm a big commitment person, habit person, but you're totally next level inspirational. Honestly, just hearing that was like, that's absolutely amazing to me.
But when you said, you don't run a marathon in a day, you put your shoes at the end of the bed. I literally put my clothes to work out next to my bed. Last thing I do before I go to sleep. is I set out what I'm going to wear when I get up at 5 a.m. and I work out. And I don't always want to do it. I tell people all the time, it's not that I have some sort of superhuman interest in getting up and going to my basement at 5 in the morning. At this point, it's a habit. And once you've kind of made those reps, started hitting it and doing it on a daily basis, it's hard not to do it. And then you start thinking, well, why would I not do it? You know, I'll wake up one day, I'll not feel great, and I'll say, oh, I don't really feel like doing it. It's like, but is this the reason that you're not going to do this thing that you've been doing for the last 4 years just because you didn't feel like it? Of course you don't feel like it,
Well,
but you're going to be
rarely
happy
feel-
afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is we rarely feel like doing, I mean, of course we feel like doing things that are easy or feel good. It's the hard stuff. You know, my husband loves to say the right thing is rarely the easy thing. That's his phraseology, especially with teenagers. And sometimes you just have to get comfortable with the idea of being uncomfortable or just doing something because you just need to check it off the list and you don't give a lot of thought to, do I feel like it? If you can remove the concept, do I feel like it? If you can remove that question, I think from your brain, you'll accomplish a lot more.
And I'll tell you, there's never been a time when I've worked out and I've regretted it. There was never a time when
I always say that. I always say it. I never want to do it. And I do it very habitually 3 days a week. No, I'm not at 7, but I always feel better after. Well, we're going to take a little break, but when we get back, I want to talk about your law career, finding law as your career, and then, of course, making your home here in the Lehigh Valley, because we are so lucky to have you here. So you're listening to Unscripted with Russo. We'll be right back. Ever wonder what you get when you combine an historical riverside city, high-end dining, entertainment venues, and craft distilleries? The city of Easton, of course. One of my favorite spots is the Easton Public Market, right in the center of it all. But there's a variety of places to choose. Whether you're looking for a park to unwind or a night out with friends, check out Discover Lehigh Valley's website to find all the hot spots in Easton. Visit their website at discoverlehighvalley.com for more information. Welcome back to Unscripted with Russo. I'm Ashley Russo. If you have not been listening to Maraleen Shields, you've been missing a great conversation and you need to hit rewind. She's got some great life lessons for us, an amazing journey and story. And we've just finished talking a little bit about your college career at Kenyon College, which holds a place near and dear to you in your heart and was definitely the right place for you. How did you find the law? How did you know that's what you wanted to study? And what did your family and friends say when you said, I'm pursuing this and I'm going to more school?
I knew I was going to law school before I ever got to Kenyon College. I was, that was just a thing you have to do to get to the next thing. It was a wonderful thing to do. But I was a huge fan of mock trial in high school. I still talk to some members of that team. There are other members of that team that are attorneys. Owen Seaman, who's in Pittsburgh, criminal law attorney. I just loved courtroom presentation. I love advocacy. I just knew that was what I wanted to do. And one of the professors that I really gravitated towards at Kenyon College was a lawyer. And he was one of the few professors at Kenyon who did not have a PhD. He had a JD. So he was and still is a huge mentor for me. And I remember talking to him about law school, and he was one of my advisors. And he said, you need to go to a place where you're going to feel comfortable. Your job is to get the law degree, to pass the bar exam. You've had your college experience. Now you just need to go someplace where you're going to be comfortable and get about the business of getting this law degree. And it's a large part of the reason why I returned home to Pittsburgh to go to law school, and they gave me a full ride. And it was like, once you don't have to think about the money part of it,
you could just focus at the task. Yeah, which is amazing. Congratulations. I mean, what a gift. And it was probably nice for you to be relatively close to family again, too.
Close to family, but in our family, you do not live at home. When once you're out of high school, you don't live at home. So I did not live at home. I lived in Shadyside. My mom still lived in my childhood home. And I would see her every so often, but it was, I was an adult. She allowed me to be an adult living on my own. I've known for for a long time that I wanted to be a lawyer. The question was, where was I going to practice? What type of law was going to practice? But I've never been someone who believes that, the thing that you do straight away is the thing that you're going to do forever. We all have these phases. And I think younger people probably get this better than people our age and older, that maybe for 10, 15 years of your life, you're going to do this. And then maybe you're going to shift gears and do something else. And, you have to have that flexibility to understand that just because I have a JD doesn't mean that that's the only thing that I can do, or the only thing I'm going to do in my life.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because people feel like if they don't have it figured out at 25, they're just in trouble. There's nothing to figure out. I love that list. I'm blanking of all the people on it, but I know Julia Child's on it. I know Oprah's on it. Like all the people who did something amazing after 40 or after 50. I always find that list fascinating. I think it's really important for young people to see there are chapters of your life. There's stages, and it's okay to do each stage. So with that, tell me what you love about the law and what brought you here to the Lehigh Valley to practice law.
All those things sort of converged. I met my husband in law school. He's from the Lehigh Valley. There was never a question in his mind that this was where he was going to be. He practiced law with his father. He still practices law with his brother. He knew before he got to law school where he was going. And, that was, and I never want to suggest that I followed anyone, because I did not follow him. I did not immediately come to the Lehigh Valley. I had a bit of a detour to Philadelphia because I wasn't sure this was the place for me. And we navigated, between Elkins Park and he was clerking over in Northampton County for a period of time. And then we just started thinking about, what do we want for our future, for our kids? Where do we want to be? And the easy answer was here. If we weren't going to be in Pittsburgh, which we both loved very much during our time in Pittsburgh, the answer was here in the Lehigh Valley. And we lived not very far from his childhood home over in South Whitehall Township. I mean, we were so thrilled with what we were able to find. This is the place where we wanted our kids to grow up.
Now that you've made your home here, I know that you are very, you're a major participant and player, mover and shaker of the Lehigh Valley. Tell our audience a little bit more about some of the things that you commit your time to. You just went through an election process, and the community advocacy and what's important to you.
Post-election, I was and am being very intentional about stepping back and waiting. It's interesting. You get lots of offers to be on boards and do things after you do something as public as running for office, but not every single, you shouldn't jump at every single opportunity. I've had to learn that after many, many years of never being able to say no, and kind of thinking that was a great thing. Oh, I never say no. If you ask me, I'll say yes. Well, that's not always great. You're not always able to give your best to every situation if you're saying yes to every single thing. But
that resonates so strongly with me, because I'm in the same boat, and it's the same thing. And I think there's a time of your life where that yes mentality is really important, because it does teach you a lot and presents you with a lot of opportunities, and you meet a lot of people. But we're in that mid-40 zone where you start to hone in on where you want to spend your time and talent and treasure in a different way. But it's challenging because when you're an achiever, an overachiever, I think you get a lot of sort of feedback from that experience. But what I found is, if I can remind myself that when I say no, someone else is getting an opportunity, that helps me a lot, because I love seeing people get opportunities. I love seeing someone step into a new role, try something, stretch themselves. I love when organizations think outside the box a little bit, with who they're going to include. So that's my own personal, what I try to remind myself is, if I say no, someone else gets to say yes, and that's a new opportunity created, and it absolves me a little bit from feeling guilty.
No, and it's important, because sometimes people will come to me and say, we haven't had someone that looks like you on our board. And I say, okay. And it's a good thing that you want to have more representation on your board. I'm all for that. But I'm not the only Black woman, so we need to make sure we're mining the depths. So lots of people are getting opportunities to shine as well. I think I'm pretty good, but I'm not. I'm the first person to say, I'm okay. There are other people too.
Well, I think you're pretty amazing, but I think and I understand why many organizations would want your involvement for who you are and what you bring to the table, not only because you represent diversity on a board. That being said, I think it's important to be having that DEI conversation. And I am so grateful that you bring to the table, here are other people to consider. Here are other people doing great things in our community who represent our community, who might be able to serve as well. Because I think getting the depth in those sort of lists and charts is really important, and it has to come from somewhere. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, it's an obligation, quite honestly, for me. And I tell people all the time, yes, I ran for judge, and yes, I would have been the first. Absolutely, I wanted that for me, but I wanted to have just the opportunity of that, the possibility of that, for people to think of it as not unusual. I mean, part of what we can struggle with sometimes is if you see the same types of leadership, you think that's what leadership looks like. And I'm trying very hard in any way that I can to disrupt what we think leadership looks like. So I would knock on someone's door and they would say to me, "Oh, but you're really young." And I'd say, "First of all, I'm not that young."
Thank you, but
Thank you, but I've been at this for a while. But just changing that narrative of what people expect a judge to look like in this county. No one is expecting it to necessarily look like me. And if I can, just by being more visible, being more present, amplifying people that are trying to kind of break those barriers, if I can make it so that the next kid coming along is like, yeah, I can do that. And I can do it right here. I don't have to go to Philly. I don't have to go to Harrisburg. I don't have to go to DC or Atlanta or New York. I can make change here. I think then I've done something.
It's absolutely critical to the success of the Lehigh Valley. And I love that you're doing that, because I remember one of the first things I learned when I started doing work with United Way was one of the most important messages is for kids to see what's possible. And if you only see what's in a few block radius of your home, you don't know what's possible. And that doesn't elicit dreams and hopes and aspirations for the future. And so you're doing a lot of things that are going to give a lot of people inspiration for the next generation, Maraleen. I really think that's the truth. And we're honored to have you be a part of this. So I do want to ask you just a few questions about the Lehigh Valley before I let you go, because this is your home and you're raising 2 kids here and your husband's here and you're his extended family. What do you love most about the Lehigh Valley?
Hopefully I'll be there on Saturday. I love my parks. I will be at the Parkway. I will run by that red covered bridge. I kind of converted into a distance runner in law school because there was no sand pit for me to jump into any longer as I got older. And I love that there's so many places here that I can go and just run. And I don't think people realize just how many wonderful gems there are in this area. And even I can get stuck in the rut of going to the same ones because I don't get tired of being in those parks. But I love that about the area, full stop. I love this place for the diversity that I see, that I am getting to experience, that quite frankly, because I now speak Spanish, I am more attuned to. And that whether that's, going to La Bicicleta or, yeah, there is so much going on here that is so vibrant and different. And if we can all just kind of get out of our own heads and see what's going on and connect the dots a little bit, there's a lot going on here. You've got Pennsylvania Dutch, you've got Puerto Rican, you've got Dominican. There's so much happening right here, and Southeast Asian. It just so much vibrant community here. I it's not
Incredible.
what I grew up with.
There are something like 62 or 64 different languages in the Allentown School District, just in the Allentown School District. That's like unbelievable. What an amazing thing. And it does speak to the diversity, which leads me to the question of food. Because we have some awesome food here. Tell me about some of the places you love, or what kind of food you love. What do you love to do with your family?
Here comes. So I said La Bicicleta, that's Venezuelan food. One of the chefs there is actually the sister of my Spanish teacher. I go to Tu Mundo Empanadas, which is just a couple blocks from my office, to pick up empanadas all the time. There are some really interesting vegan places. Have you been to Almost Vegan?
Yes.
They just moved. Their new grand reopening out at the mall is going to be February 5th. Really interesting. Generally I'm not vegan, but I will eat there.
But since one of our cameramen is vegan on our staff, and he's been with me for 5 or 6 years now. So we're always trying out new places, and all of us trying to kind of incorporate that. And it's amazing how it's grown in the Lehigh Valley.
Yes, the Vegan Butcher is just over
and the veg fest is amazing, and there's just places all over. So that's, I love that as well. Yeah, good.
We try very hard to eat and eat differently. I can't tell you the last time I was at kind of a basic. I want something interesting that I can't do myself. That's kind of how I think about going out to eat. I don't know how to make an arepa, but I know someone that does.
Right. I think about it exactly the same way. And that's what makes it sort of fun, is to taste the flavors and the spices and the ingredients that maybe isn't on your regular grocery list. What about your family? What do you guys like to do? Your children are, I believe, 11 and 6. What do you guys like to do as a family? Are there any special activities or places you frequent regularly?
During COVID, it's been very slim pickings. We used to be regular Doherty Park people, and we will be back there as soon as we can kind of do so in a safe way. We're all actually just getting over COVID, so we're actually ready to see the whole
Get back
world
out there in the world. Yeah.
I'm going to use the super immunity to its greatest. I'm sure we'll go up to the Poconos and we'll spend some time in Kalahari, but we will bike somewhere. We will do something. I mean, part of the problem is now our weather is not exactly helping us, but we're ready to kind of get back out and explore. We've been kind of huddled in our house for, it feels like forever.
Yeah, and there is a lot to do here, right? Like there's a lot to do with kids and family. You mentioned some of our favorite spots when my kids were younger as well. And I think that that's another great thing about the Lehigh Valley, is how easy it is to access parks, activities, restaurants, all within 20 minutes. If you're willing to go an hour, the list is hundreds of places long. And a lot of free stuff here. There's like a lot of free stuff in the Valley. I feel like you could never spend a dime and have something fun to do.
You could. There's the new indoor
air park type things. Yeah.
Air park type things.
My kids loved those.
In Trexlertown. We've got to get there. There are a lot of family members here. So sometimes for them, it's just getting them all at someone's house. And that seems to be enough.
And that's an activity in and of itself, I would imagine. It is with our family.
Yes, there are a lot of, my husband's one of 5, and there are a lot of grandkids, and they all are here right in the Lehigh Valley area. So it's makes our life very easy. We can just kind of let our children kind of go off with their cousins, and they're perfectly happy.
Nice to have the infrastructure of family for sure. Well, Maraleen, we could talk all day, very clearly. I look forward to us getting together in person. But before I let you go, I do want to ask you quick rapid fire questions. There are only a few of them, and I want you to confirm for the audience you have not seen these.
I have not seen any questions.
All right. So
there were no questions for any of this.
First question. Ready? Quick answer. What is your favorite hobby or a secret talent?
I'm a pretty good singer, actually.
All right. I like that. See, now we know in case they do The Voice Lehigh Valley, who to call. All right. What's the best advice you've ever received?
Get out of school without debt.
Great advice. What actress would you cast to play you in a movie about your life?
When I was young, I was told that I looked like Rudy from the Cosby Show. I will say Keisha Knight Pulliam.
I love that one. And I love that show. And I can see there's that one. So I love it. Okay. If you didn't have the job now, what would you be doing instead? Other career option.
I'd be a teacher. I'd be a professor in a school. Mhm.
I suspect that that is a thing you will do at some point in your career. You spoke a lot about mentors who are teachers, and I remember you saying that professor that was also a JD. So we will stay tuned to see what happens next. Maraleen Shields, thank you so much for joining me on Unscripted with Russo. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
It's wonderful talking to you. I can't wait till we get together. We can rent the runway. We can.
Oh, yes,
we can
that's right. We
eat.
should let people know we are avid Rent the Runway fans. We both do the monthly plan. And so if you see Maraleen around town and she's looking fabulous, you know that you too can have her outfit by going to Rent the Runway. And no, they're not a sponsor of Unscripted. Not yet, anyway.
Or me. They should be. But
they should be. I know. We're going to get the Lehigh Valley Rent the Runway girls together to see what we can come up with. All right, Maraleen, thanks again for joining us. You guys are listening to Unscripted with Russo. Until next time.